In today's lesson, we're going to talk about significant figures and rounding with basic math, such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So with addition and subtraction, when counting sig figs, you would use the least amount of decimal places. For example, 1.01 plus 6.76493. You put those in your calculator. 1.01 plus 6.76493. You get 7.77493. So now we're going to round, and if we need to, and find the number of sig figs we need. So 1.01 went to 2 decimal places. This one went to 5 decimal places, and our answer is presented with 5 decimal places. We said use the least number of decimal places, so we want 2 decimal places. So our final answer is going to be 7.77. I didn't have to do any rounding because the 4 that's behind the 7 is not 5 or greater, so therefore I don't have to round up 1. Now let's look at these two examples. We have 0.010 plus 4.266. Get 4.276 out in your calculator, and that's what I put down here, and that's 3 decimal places. To determine the number of decimal places, though, I'm looking at what I'm actually adding and subtracting. So therefore, I'll want 3 decimal places in my final answer. 4.276 will be my final answer with the 3 decimal places needed. For B, it's 3.100 minus 0.809357. You get 2.290643. I go and look at how many decimal places I had for what I was subtracting. 3 decimal places for 3.100 and 6 decimal places for 0.809357. So looking at those two, I know I'm going to want 3 decimal places in the end. Again, this yellow here is just writing down what the calculator gave me to show that I'm keeping track of everything. So now for my final answer, 2.291. I wanted 3 decimal places, and there's a 6 behind that 0, so you have to round up 1 for your final answer. Now let's look at multiplication and division. So here you're using the least amount of significant figures. So again, when addition and subtraction, you went by decimal places, the least amount of decimal places. Multiplication and division, you're going by the least amount of significant figures. So let's look at this example. 6.2 times 2.837. 17.5894 is what I got in my calculator. So I wrote that down. So now I need to round and figure out how many sig figs I would need. So 6.2 is 2 sig figs. That's what the S stands for. 2.834 That's 4 significant figures. 17.5894, what my calculator gave me, is 6 significant figures. I want the least amount, so I want 2 sig figs. So 17 point, and then I look at that 5 that's after it. I'm going to round up 1. So my final answer is going to be 18, and that's 2 sig figs. Now let's combine multiplication and division with addition and subtraction. So make sure you follow the order of operations here. So how you remember that is use an acronym if you can't remember on your own. An acronym I use is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So now I'm going to start in the parentheses. 5.67 minus 2.3. Write that down. 3.37. Then I'm going to go ahead and start keeping track of how many decimal places I would need for that subtraction part. 5.67 is 2 decimal places, and 2.3 has 1 decimal place. So I know I'm going to need 1 decimal place, so 3.3 with 2 sig figs. That's what I keep track of when I'm going to my final answer. Now I take 3.37 because remember, I need to keep track of everything until the very end. Times that 3.489. That 11.75793. That's what's in that yellow here. That's what's in my calculator. Now I need to do rounding and give my answer in significant figures. So 3.489 has 4 significant figures. And then we said earlier, when we subtract it, we want it to go to just 1 decimal place. So 3.3 are the sig figs that we're looking at here. So that's 2 sig figs. So my final answer needs to be the least amount for now this multiplying. So 2 sig figs. So I took the 11 and I rounded up because there's a 7 behind that 1 for a final answer of 12. If you want to practice on your own, go ahead and pause. Alright, let's now get back to it. Let's look at A. So it says carry out the following operations and express the answer with the appropriate number of significant figures. For A, 2.19 times 4.2. 2.19, our calculator, times 4.2. 9.19, I got in my calculator. It's multiplying and dividing, so I need to look at the total number of sig figs here. There's 3 and 2.19, and 2 sig figs in the 4.2, so I want 2 sig figs in my final answer. So 9.1 in the calculator, look behind it, we got a 9, it's 5 or greater, so we round up 1 to 9.2 sig figs. B, 4.311 divided by 0.07. Got 61.585714 and so on. So this is dividing. So I want to go by the least amount of sig figs. So 4.311 has 4 sig figs. 0.07 has 1 sig fig. So I'm going to round this 1 down to 0 for a final answer of 60. So now I have my 1 significant figure. Now, if that 1 was 5 or greater in this answer, I would have rounded up to 70. So that's how I knew to go to 60 right there. Now let's look at C. 2.54 times 0.0028. You can write that down if you want to go ahead too. A lot of times you do at the beginning. And then you're going to divide. You're going to need your parentheses here. Make sure your calculator uses this part first. 0.0105 times 0.060, close parentheses, at 11.28, and so on with those 8s. So you're doing multiplying and dividing here. So I'm going to go by the least amount of significant figures. 2.54 has 3 sig figs. 0.0028 has 2 sig figs. Remember, the zeros to the left are in front of the integers, are not significant. 0.015 has 3 sig figs, and 0.060 has 2 sig figs. 2 is the least amount down here, so I want 2 sig figs in my final answer. So if I look at that 11.28, 11 is where I have 2 sig figs. I look at this 2 behind that 1 and see that it's not 5 or greater. Therefore, I don't have to round up. Final answer is 11. Here's some more practice problems. Go ahead and pause if you want to try them on your own. Alright, now let's get back to it. For number 1, we have 35.3 minus 35.147. Calculator has 0.153. I'm subtracting. I need to go to 1 decimal place in my final answer because that's the least amount. So my final answer is 0.2 because there's a 5 behind that 1, meaning I need to round up 1. Or you can also write that in significant notation, putting 2 times 10 to the negative 1. For number 2, 0.3567 divided by 2.9, you get 0.123. I'm dividing, so I want the least amount of sig figs. 0.3567 has 4, 2.9 has 2, so I wrote 0.12 for my final answer. There's a 3 behind that 2. You see that in the calculator, so therefore I did not need to round up 1. And then you can also write that in significant notation, such as 1.2 times 10 to the negative 1. For number 3, you get your parentheses first. It's the first thing I'm going to write in, so I don't need to add them right now. But if you're just getting started, you might want to go ahead and remind yourself to do that. So 8.713 times 0.0300153, close the parentheses, divide by 0.0564, 4.6582, and so on. Remember, I kept all my numbers to the very end. Now I'm multiplying and dividing. I want the least amount of significant figures. 8.713 has 4 sig figs. 0.030153 has 5 significant figures. And 0.564 has 3 significant figures. So I want my final answer to 3 sig figs. 4.66. There was an 8 behind this 5 in the calculator, so I had to round up 1 to 6. And that's my final answer, 4.66. Number 4, keep your parentheses, 0.0037 times 29.6, close parentheses, divide by, open parentheses now, 15.04 minus 9.820, close parentheses, 0.020980, and so on. Again, I kept all the numbers in the calculator to the very end, so I can have the appropriate numbers and rounding to significant figures. 0.0037 had 2 sig figs. It had the least amount of significant figures. So my final answer will be to 2 sig figs. 0.020. The 2 0 are my 2 significant figures. There's a 9 behind that 0, so I rounded up 1. So 0.021 is my final answer to 2 significant figures. And in scientific notation, you get 2.1 times 10 to the negative 2. That's all I have for this lesson. Make sure to like and subscribe and to check out my blog at coplandtutoring.net.